Welcome back to The Survival Historian, where we uncover the untold stories of ingenuity that kept soldiers alive when the odds were stacked against them. Today, we're pulling back the frozen canvas of history to reveal something extraordinary: how the simplest principles of physics and fieldcraft became the difference between life and death during the most brutal European winter of World War II. Picture this. December 1944, the Ardennes forest. Temperatures plunged to -20 degrees Celsius. Your foxhole has become an ice tomb, and frostbite claims more casualties than bullets. In this frozen hell, survival didn't come from some factory-produced miracle weapon. It came from understanding how to turn a shelter half, some pine branches, and the ancient principle of the microclimate into your personal defiance against winter's killing grip. The invisible enemy, when winter became the deadliest weapon. The winter of 1944 to 1945 stands as one of the coldest on record in 20th century Europe, and it transformed the battlefield into something far more sinister than enemy fire could ever achieve. As Allied forces pushed through Belgium and into Germany, they encountered an adversary that respected no flag and showed no mercy: hypothermia. Medical reports from the Battle of the Bulge reveal a staggering truth. For every 3 combat casualties, there was 1 cold weather injury. Trench foot, frostbite, and hypothermia weren't just debilitating, they were strategic catastrophes that pulled entire units off the line. Soldiers huddled in hastily dug foxholes found themselves in a desperate race against their own body temperature. The frozen earth resisted entrenching tools, forcing men to scrape shallow depressions that offered minimal protection. Canvas shelter halves, designed for 3-season use, became pitifully inadequate barriers against winds that cut through wool uniforms like they were paper. The logistical nightmare compounded everything. Fuel for fires was scarce, smoke gave away positions to enemy artillery, and moving supplies through snow-choked roads became nearly impossible. Command faced an impossible question: how do you keep an army operational when the environment itself is trying to shut down every biological system? Engineering survival. The science of the improvised shelter. What emerged from this crucible wasn't a single piece of equipment stamped shelter tube in some quartermaster's inventory. Instead, it was something far more impressive: the rapid evolution of field-tested engineering principles that transformed basic materials into life-preserving microclimates. The genius lay in understanding thermodynamics at its most fundamental level and applying it with whatever came to hand. The standard-issue shelter half became the foundation of this survival system. When properly erected, these triangular canvas sections created a confined airspace, the critical first principle. 2 soldiers would button their shelter halves together, creating a low-profile tent that minimized the volume of air their body heat needed to warm. But the real innovation came from what happened beneath and around this canvas shell. Soldiers learned to dig down, not just out. A foxhole dug 3 feet deep placed men below the frost line, where earth temperatures stabilized, providing thermal mass that absorbed and slowly released heat. The removed soil, packed around the shelter's perimeter, created windbreaks that eliminated convective heat loss, the silent killer that could drop core body temperature 5 degrees in an hour. The material science behind survival clothing deserves equal recognition as battlefield engineering. Wool, that ancient fiber, became the unsung hero of winter warfare. Unlike cotton, which loses all insulating properties when wet, wool retains approximately 70% of its warmth even when saturated. The M43 field jacket system, introduced late in the war, represented a quantum leap in understanding layered insulation. An inner wool layer trapped air warmed by body heat, a wind-resistant outer shell prevented convective loss, and the design allowed for ventilation to prevent sweat accumulation. the deadly moisture that could freeze against skin within minutes of stopping movement. But perhaps the most overlooked innovation was the soldiers' rediscovery of techniques as old as human survival itself. Pine boughs laid beneath bedrolls created dead air spaces that insulated from the frozen ground. Snow, when properly packed around a shelter's base, transformed from enemy to ally, its cellular structure trapping air that insulated better than sandbags. Soldiers learned that a shelter dug into a snowbank, its entrance below the sleeping platform, created a cold air sump where dense, frigid air settled, leaving warmer air at breathing level. This wasn't taught in training manuals. It was remembered from grandfathers' hunting stories, from Native American techniques, from the collective survival knowledge that resurfaces when civilization's comforts evaporate. The human element, warmth as a weapon of war. The technical specifications matter less than what they meant to the men who implemented them. A dry pair of socks, rotated and dried inside a jacket, became more valuable than ammunition. The knowledge that you could survive the night without losing toes to frostbite meant you could focus on the mission instead of your mortality. Unit cohesion strengthened when soldiers shared body heat in paired shelters, when they took turns maintaining small, carefully concealed fires, when they taught each other the tricks that kept extremities viable. This wasn't just survival engineering, it was the preservation of fighting capability through the coldest months of the European campaign. The legacy, the principles that endure. The lessons learned in those frozen foxholes didn't disappear with VE Day. Modern camping equipment, from double wall tents to moisture-wicking base layers, descends directly from the principles soldiers proved in the Ardennes. Understanding that survival depends on managing the microclimate around your body, not fighting the macroclimate of the environment, revolutionized how we approach cold weather operations. Today's special forces train in these same fundamentals: insulation from the ground, protection from wind, moisture management, and creating the smallest viable heated space. The so-called shelter tube was never one thing. It was the cumulative genius of hundreds of thousands of soldiers applying physics, material science, and ancient fieldcraft to the most modern of wars. It reminds us that survival often comes not from technological superiority, but from understanding fundamental principles and adapting them to desperate circumstances. As we remember World War II, let's not only honor the battles won, but also the quieter victories. The night survived, the frostbite prevented, the body heat shared between brothers in arms. If this deep dive into survival history resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to The Survival Historian. Share this with anyone who appreciates how human ingenuity rises to meet impossible challenges. Next time, we'll explore another overlooked innovation that kept soldiers alive when everything else wanted them dead. Until then, stay curious, stay prepared, and remember, history's greatest lessons often come from the simplest solutions forged in the hardest moments.